Hello, I'm Josh Wachtel. Welcome to Building a New Reality uh, January weekly uh, webinar, the lunch break with Josh and Ted Wachtel. And Ted will be coming on in a little bit, as well as a special guest that we have today. And as I've been doing, I'm going to kick things off with the song. This is a song I wrote with an old friend of mine, late friend, Alex Panchin, and this is called Digging a Hole. Digging a hole, just like I've been told. Digging a hole, we're looking for gold. Digging a hole, I bless my soul. We're digging a hole. Now look at the hole we're in, deeper than it's ever been. Don't know how to get out again. Look at that hole. Just look at that hole. Out on a limb and there's no looking down. Out on a limb, I want my feet on the ground. Out on a limb and it's bending on down. We're out on a limb. We're out on a limb. Now the limb is starting to crack. Looks like it's about to snap. I think it's too late to go back. We're out on a limb. We're out on a limb. Out of control and our number is up. Out of control and the gas pedal's stuck. Out of control and we're shit out of luck. We're out of control. We're out of control. We're all far out of control. We gotta fill in that hole. We need a way to make things whole. But we keep digging that hole. Digging a hole, just like I've been told. Digging a hole, but there ain't no gold. Digging a hole, give me a pole. Gotta leap out of this hole. Gotta leap out of this hole. Gotta leap out of this hole. All right. Well, digging a hole, but we're trying to leap out. That is the theme of building a new reality. So let me welcome Ted Wachtel, founder of Building a New Reality, and also the founder of the International Institute for Restorative Practices Graduate School. And as a lot of you folks know, we're deeply involved in restorative practices and coming out of restorative justice. And we're deeply involved now in really trying to think about a lot of movements that are happening in the world to counter some of the trends that have gotten us into this hole. So, Ted, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Good.
I have to admit, I am burdened by what's going on right now. It's been pretty dramatic of late, so I'm good. But there's just an overtone of, oh my God, what's happening in our lives? How is this going to work out? And I'd like to not dwell on that because there's plenty of time and places to do that. But yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not as well as I could be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you cite Buckminster Fuller all the time. With if you want to change the reality, build systems, make the old system obsolete.
Well,
Maybe we
yeah,
don't
he
have. I
says
mean,
it's better not to critique the old systems and rather build a model that works better and makes the old systems obsolete rather than
And the old systems are doing a good job of obsolescence. I mean, we're burdened by their obsolescence. I mean, some of it is intentional, but it's not serving as as many people as it could be and might be. So
Well, and for us right now, I mean, what you and I obviously have agreed on a path of pursuing a collaboration between new and old social strands of social innovation and trying to see if we can put something together that helps build a new reality, in particular in governance. I've worked most of my life in learning and care and justice, working with restorative justice, restorative practice schools, and all that. But now, I think a lot of us are interested in the whole idea of how are we going to all live together and make decisions better than we are. So the strands that I'm particularly interested in, of course, are restorative practices, which I've been at for many decades now. But more newly, this whole idea of deliberative democracy, which brings people together to have conversations, very much like you do in micro restorative practices, but much larger groups of people and much more challenging and structured issues. And then there's this depolarization movement that's really interests me with the Braver Angels in particular, who are trying to bring people together to learn how to have arguments well and enjoy them, in fact, and that we can. And it's tying in particular, our guest today uh, has already made a connection, I felt, with between deliberative democracy, depolarization, restorative, and an old social innovation, the League of Women Voters. And
mm,
I'll let him
yeah,
tell you about that. But
yeah, we'll get to that. I'm going to add a strand though, which is very relevant today. Nonprofits in general, as an institution, you've written about this, and you have a book which includes nonprofits as one of the. You want to just say
well,
a word about that?
yeah, just briefly. I mean, nonprofits are what I call the third sector. There's government, and there's corporate or large businesses and enterprises, and then there's the rest of us. And the kind of institution that serves a lot of needs for the rest of us, that's neither governmental nor a corporate stock-driven type business, are nonprofits. And I think one of the first ones was the Young Men's Christian Association in the 1700s. I mean, they began to
Yeah,
bubble up as society had needs that weren't being filled either by business or government. And so that's the kind of businesses largely. I've done some for-profit enterprise, but mostly
yeah,
Susan and I have worked in the nonprofit sector. And I think it does fit into
yeah,
being
well,
part of a way we can innovate and not and do it and have a structure that uh, meets the test of competing in a enterprise situation. In other words, free enterprise where no, you don't just get government contracts, and it's one way that, but you go out and you compete in the marketplace, but you're a nonprofit, and your
yeah.
proceeds get plowed back into your cause. So.
Yeah, yeah. So, your book's Kinder, Gentler Capitalism, if anybody wants to look for that. And you talked about a number of innovations in the economic areas, including B corporations and other things, but nonprofits
Yeah.
as well. And I was thinking of a book that I'm familiar with, Blessed Unrest by Paul Hawken, who this is about 15 years ago. He wrote this book and was really tracking that nonprofits are enormously growing sector
Right.
throughout the world.
They actually, in the US now, I think they employ about 10%
That's
of the
amazing.
workforce. Yeah,
Yeah. So
in the
that's an
US. I think it's the
alternative.
largest percentage in the US
Right.
uh, in that instance. In
Yeah.
the UK, the voluntary sector is substantial, but smaller in terms of employment.
Yeah. So, you started a nonprofit 1977, Community Service Foundation. I wanted to ask you about that. I love that Einstein quote that inspired the name. What can you say?
Yeah, well, Community Service Foundation was a pretty innocuous name in some ways for a new organization, but we were going to work with troubled youth, and we weren't sure what to call it or what exactly what form it would take. But it was meant to be an organization to help kids change their behavior was its main function. But the quote from Einstein was from a speech he gave in 1936 on education. And, Einstein knew a lot of things. Did he have anything particularly profound to say about education? And yeah, he did. He said essentially, the aim of education is to train independently acting and thinking individuals. However, their first responsibility was service to the community. And that was to be their highest life problem. So essentially saying, yes, we should be in the spirit of capitalism, free enterprise, whatever, but we should be free and independent individuals, but we should have a sense of commitment to the larger community. And we were going to be an organization, as it turned out, that built a lot of community within our schools and group homes. And maybe I'll just, this might be a good segue to Lee, but uh, basically, I remember back when I was just getting this thing together and I visited some existing alternative programs. And there was one up in a city in Pennsylvania that had an empty school. There had been downsizing in school districts. And they had like 30 kids in this one school building. So obviously it was a big empty building. And way down the hallway when I went to visit, there were kids. But along the way, there were kids sitting in the hallway, sort of each in front of a doorway, about 20 some kids sitting there with paper and pencil. And I don't know, it's weird. I said, gee, hi, what's happening? And they explained that there had been a racial incident and a threatened fight. And so I said, oh, so what are those kids doing? Well, they're figuring out their demerits. So they had some sort of a system and scores and points, but at no point did they have any plan to talk about what happened. They had no sense of how to do that. They were afraid they'd rekindle the dispute. And that became the core of what we learned how to do. And Lee Rush was one of our first people to learn how to do that and help us learn how to do it. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, let's bring Lee Rush on.
shall
Um,
I hop off now, perhaps?
you're gonna split? No, I think you should stay on. You might have things to say, stuff to add. Hi, Lee.
How you
Welcome,
doing?
welcome to the lunch break. Good to have you.
Good to see you. Thanks for the song. Who's your friend behind you?
That's Amber.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
yeah,
Got a four-legged.
yeah, yeah. I thought she'd make a nice prop. So,
Yeah.
as long as she behaves herself. Uh, so Lee, we'll get into all of it. You're retired now, sort
I
of.
am
You're still
officially,
doing
officially. Yeah.
officially retired, but you've worked for CSF, Community Service Foundation, early. You've worked for LifeQuest, you said, and we'll get into that. You had your own nonprofit. Speaking of nonprofits, JustCommunity, and
Yep.
you ran that for 26 years. And you also did training and other work with the International Institute for Restorative Practices, plus other community stuff, which I hope we can touch on a bunch of those things as we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
So,
All the above is true.
all right, well let's get right to it.
All right.
What was it like going to
Well,
work? Yeah.
I I have always enjoyed telling this story, and I know I know Ted's a little older than me, so maybe my memory's a little better, but I'm sure he'll remember that I met him when he was a teacher in high school. I went to Penridge High School where Ted first worked, I think, in the 1970s. Um, And I never had Ted as a teacher in a subject matter, but he had started a media center, and my 11th grade teacher had helped us do some different projects. And she said, if you'd like to help learn how to make a film, there's a guy named Mr. Wachtel. You can go visit him over at Sellersville Elementary. And that was my first introduction to Ted, uh, or Mr. Wachtel at that point. So anyway, real quick story. We walked down in the basement, and he was setting up some things with projectors and whatnot. And I think we were some of his first clients or customers in the school, and he was very anxious and happy to help us create storyboards for our film and help us learn how to edit of 8 millimeter. And then I didn't see him for another couple of years till I got out of college, and I came back home to where I live here in Percy, and I ran into, well, I still probably called him Mr. Wachtel, but he said, "No, call me Ted. You're out of school, and what are you doing?" I said, "I'm not looking for a job." I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I quit Penn Ridge. I started my own school." And I said, "You what?" He goes, "Yeah, I really wanted to start my own school." And I said, "Well, where is it?" And he said, "It's across town. I just rented a storefront. We'll go over and I'll show you." So he drives me across town. We park in front of this bank of storefronts in a little town nearby called Sellersville. And he points to the corner unit and he said, "Right there, 120 North Main." And I kind of like, I don't know what I did. I just kind of reacted like it probably maybe a little strange. And he goes, "What's the matter?" I said, "Mr. Wachtel or Ted," I said, "that used to be a pool hall." And I was a bit of a delinquent, not seriously, but I would, sometimes cut school and go there to play pool and act real cool. And he said, "You mean you hung out there?" I said, "Yeah, that was our hangout. It's a bunch of teenagers, and now it's your school." He said, "Well, that's a great omen." "And what did you study?" I said, "Criminology." He said, "Well, do you know anything about juveniles?" I go, "Yeah, I was one." And he goes, "Well, I think, I just wrote a grant and I'm looking for a counselor." And basically, long story short, he hired me pretty much on the spot. And that was the beginning of my career. And it's been, almost 50 years since that day. It's been an amazing journey. So I worked there for a while, and I thought if I could share my screen, I just thought I like pictures. So let me just quick show you this picture that was in the
Please.
local newspaper. Can you see this picture?
Oh my gosh, this one.
Can you
Holy
see this?
cow.
All right.
Yes. Yeah, we see it.
So
There's
this
there's
pic
my dad with his Wrangler jeans jacket or something. There you are. Huh.
this picture here, your mom is over here on the left. Susan
Yeah,
was
yeah.
a coordinator.
Oh my
So
God.
there's Ted at his early 30s. I was in my mid 20s. This was 1979, and the paper did a local story on our school, and these are some of the other employees here: Norma, Jerry, Jim Bunn, Bruce, and this fellow here, Mike Finnegan. I just
Okay.
want to, I don't know where Mike is in the world, but he certainly influenced CSF early on. He came from Boston and really helped us learn how to facilitate groups,
Mm.
facilitate group discussions. What Ted talked about, that a lot of adults didn't know how to talk to kids. They punished them. They taught them specific subjects, but we learned how to open up the avenues of communication with teenagers who did not want to be in the school. And that was the beginning of my career. So that was
That
it.
is pulling on my heartstrings, Lee, because I remember all those people at that
Oh,
time.
you do?
Oh
You
yeah.
you were pretty
Well, I
young.
spent a lot of time in that storefront because anytime, you guys took the kids bowling or something, my parents would say, "You want to take off from school?" I was like, "Yeah." Anytime there was a day off, I hung out there and I got in the dark room and all the cool stuff. And, there was the mini farm and and the dome they built out there and the food co-op and then Tough Love
It
was
was,
going. So
yeah.
it was wild.
It was loud, and it grew. And before you knew it, your dad had rented every unit on this block. It was a block long of units, and he kept adding programs, grants. He was a grant writer, and he raised money for a mini farm, and it was terribly exciting. So I was there from 1979 to 1984, and
Yeah.
then Ted started a second school, and that was down in Lower Bucks. And I said to Ted, that it was the first replication of the model. And I think what it did for the county probation, it was like we weren't just working with, upper bucks, kids from rural schools or suburban. It was down close to the city. And I was there for 2 more years. But I wanted to share one more thing real quick about the early years. What you did, Ted, is you gave me um, a lot of latitude to pursue what I love to do. He said, if you love it, get into it and teach kids how to do it. So I did photography. I like to teach social studies. But what I really like to do is sports. So I came across a phenomenon called new games. And I
New
know that
games.
Ted will remember this because he said, whatever we'll do it. Let's do it. And what do you want to do? I said, a festival. We're going to invite the whole community. And he said, do what? I said, play games. Ted sent me to a training, invested in some training. We got T-shirts for kids to help with the games. And we did a games festival in September 1979. Hundreds of people showed up behind our local school. And it was in the papers. And
We rolled that. We rolled that earth ball. That's, I don't know if it was 6 foot. It felt like it was 6 foot when I
It
was.
was 6 foot.
We rolled it all the way down the street. There it is. Oh my God, there I am.
All right. So there's Josh on top of this earth ball. And for anybody on the call here that might have remembered back in the 1970s, 80s, the New Games Foundation was doing work programs all over the world to teach cooperative games. It was the brainchild of Stuart Brand from the Whole Earth catalog and people like George Leonard, who was really into a lot of interesting kind of meditation. Anyway, long story short, actually, this is my brother Jimmy, and this is Ben. I think this is your brother.
That's what I was gonna say.
It's Ben.
Yeah.
So we would go and do these festivals. We did 8 of them in Bucks County over 3 years.
Oh
And
wow.
it was a wonderful program because what it did is it allowed the community to see that this alternative high school for these troubled kids on probation was doing great things for uh, for the community. And I think the kids that were in our school got to see themselves in a very positive light.
Yeah.
That they were now in the paper and they were doing something in a positive way
Yeah.
and having fun. So and so
Yeah.
anyway, just to finish his thought on new games, it infected me and it kind of informed a lot of my work with people around play and humor. So to this day, there's still things out there that are reminiscent of that time. Um, I can
Yeah.
refer to something at the end of the call. I'll refer to a website if people are interested.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to bring up that strand. I think it's another important strand. It's not, it's a different kind of a strand. It's just a social, it's almost like a meme or something, to have these games where they're non-competitive. They're so
Well,
much
yeah,
fun.
essentially, people build things like they create a conveyor belt and move children up them out of human bodies, and it's a strange way for people to play, but it means nobody has to win. It's like, can you get this accomplished? Can you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
a lot of
Well,
the
it
games are
builds,
everybody working together.
that's right. It builds group feeling. It builds group dynamics,
Well, fun.
parachutes, and some of them are theater games. So you could use it in a counseling setting. I've been in your sessions at conferences, and you have us all playing I remember rock paper scissors, and everybody once you lose, you start cheering for the next guy, and it's a
One
great
of the
group spirit.
one of the craziest games is people close their eyes and the leader whispers into their ear, cow, chicken, or donkey. And then they make sounds of that animal and keep their eyes closed and have to find their own tribe. Now, when you get a bunch of adults with many degrees and very serious people walking around, with their eyes closed, quacking like a duck, and then they realize that
And looking for other
and
ducks.
looking for other ducks, that the metaphor, if you will, the metaphorical level of play is that that we are playful. We're the species. We learn by play. We learn by play, and then we kind of get serious and get to be adults and get jobs and get very serious, and then our play becomes structured, or some kind of organized play. But yeah, so in a way, the last thing about play is that it became a way to build a community. And the fellow who developed new games, Bernie DeKoven, talked about a play community. where everybody has a say in the rules, and you can make up rules that make the game more fun. That the game ends not when a time is expired, but when the people say, let's play a new game or let's just stop playing. Anyway, we infused that in the
No,
school.
yeah,
We uh, we had a great time. It was a great
yeah,
beginning of my career. I owe, I think, a lot of my early enthusiasm for my work with CSF. Absolutely.
yeah. Well, I want to just dwell on that point a little because, when we talk about restorative practices, a lot of times we're talking about serious things, and serious incidents that they're working on. And even in learning, a lot of times when we're talking about learning, it's like, hard work and, lectures and homework and how are we going to get kids to do this, that, and the other thing. But one of the six facets that we're talking about, trying to highlight through this expanded view of restorative practices, is learning.
Yes.
And we're not just talking about how are we going to get to do kids to do the things they don't want to do. Part of it, what we're saying is, no, let's look at learning. People learn, like, let's just blow it open. How can we do learning
Well,
better?
Well, and a core value in learning that really makes it successful is if people feel that it's relevant to them. And there's a variety of reasons how it becomes relevant. Sometimes you're in a dangerous situation and man, you got to learn this stuff fast because,
Yeah.
or you just want to win the game and you want to get better at it and you'll learn it and whatever. But once you value it, people are really highly motivated. That's how some of these big, what do you call it, group decision making things work. People come
Mm.
and James Fishkin talks about how people learn so much in such a short period of time because they're like motivated. Sorry, back
Well,
to you.
yeah, no, 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 that's okay. Because I remember we're going to get to all these subjects. I remember, Dad, you saying, I forget which one of the citizens' assemblies, maybe in Ireland, and the wife was saying how her husband had taken no interest in the news, and all of a sudden, he's reading the newspaper every day.
Well,
And
that was one of Fishkin's things,
oh,
and the
that was
lady
Fishkin.
said to Fishkin, I'm really happy my husband's going to be fun in retirement. He never read a newspaper in his life until he came into one of these, and now he reads 5 a day. We have things to talk about. So it was just like a
Yeah.
interesting side look
Well,
at what happens when you get people involved.
yeah, well, we're all about lifelong learning. And, when somebody does something wrong, we want them to learn from it, right? That's our idea of justice is that people are, making amends, learning, and changing. And so the idea of restorative practices, and how can we bring that sense to young people? Like trusting young people that they want to learn if we hook them. What do you think about that, Lee?
well, one of the things I remember your dad, and I was not well read in educational philosophy. I studied criminology, like I said. But I remember your dad saying once, well, Ted, you're here. Ted, you said once morning about school, in our school, CSF, you said, well, I like John Dewey. He was an educational philosopher. He said, start to where the child is. So we were small. When I was there, we were like 10, 12 kids to start. So we would interview and ask kids what they really like to do. I remember this one kid, John, because I shouldn't say his last name in case he's out there. Anyway, John liked to cook. And he was from Quakertown. You might remember the name. And you said, we'll make sure that you get a chance to cook some food for us because we had no cafeteria. And like I said, he told me, like, you like photography, teach photography. And our school was I think it was one of the first alternative high schools in Pennsylvania in the 1970s. It was licensed not as a school initially. It was a counseling program through court. But people started to take notice, like, what are you doing with these kids? They're coming to school every day. And because it was a fun place and it was a vigorous place in some ways, and it was a caring place. And I remember you saying, Ted, we need to learn about drug and alcohol because none of us had that background. And a lot of our kids in the 1980s were using, and it was a big deal. So we all became certified addictions counselors. And we would have specialists come in once a week with our staff meeting and teach us skills. So we learned how to do, some counseling around drugs and family work. and there was constant growth of the adults in the program that mirrored what kids were doing. Susan, your mom used to do a lot of tutoring and teaching with English and math skills, and some of these kids, when they got sober, suddenly advanced 3 or 4 levels and they could pass their regular courses in public school. They went back to public school, some of them graduated. So, the momentum happened, and it's now 30 years, 40 years later, and the schools are still thriving in Southeast PA and have a great reputation. So, yeah, it was a great career, like I said, to begin
It's
Yeah.
there.
actually 48 years. We opened the first one in 1977, and we're coming on our 50th anniversary of this whole notion of dreaming of a new reality.
Right.
All
So I
right.
hope some of you will be with us 2 years from now to help
Oh yeah. Oh, why
make some
not?
of these things happen.
I just gonna take a little pause for a second and just invite if anybody out there wants to, chat in some questions or any comments that you have for us or that would contribute relevant to your work. We'd love to see that and have that. But maybe at this point, Lee, let's talk a little bit about where you ended up going
All right.
after. Yeah.
Um, yeah, just a little side note before I forget. I think my brother's on this call, so I want to say one other thing about the philosophy. Because your parents started the school, there was a belief that family and friends really are important. So we had a lot of couples. Susan mentioned the Yorks last time. We had some other couples that worked there. My wife worked there for a while. And that was weird because I was her boss a little bit until Ted started this second school. Then I got out of there and I didn't have to boss my wife around because I wasn't the boss. She was the boss. I knew that. So my wife and I had a great experience there learning, together. Anyway, so I left. Long story short, 1986. As we were learning more things, the community intervention came to town from Minneapolis. And I forget, Ted, how you got involved with them. But anyway, they came and it was a big 80-person training in the community. Little did I know that it was going to be my next step in my career because our local community had experienced a lot of youth suicides. It was very, very traumatic. I think there were 9 in 2 years.
Yeah,
Multiple.
there
So
were
9
three.
suicides.
There were three in my school, and I knew those kids. Yeah.
It was a really big deal. It was a cluster suicides. So the local hospital decided to build their own drug rehab. Ted was actually hired as a consultant to help them design it. And long story short, I was hired to be a director of training, something called Project Care, that they wanted to have a feeder program for teaching in schools about, drug and alcohol use. So then I left CSF, became the director of that program. Interesting enough that when the trainings were developed, then I would be able to go back to CSF and offer a lot of discounted training for beginning trainers or counselors and teachers. So there was this symbiotic relationship. I stayed in touch with Ted for years after that. Did that for quite a while. And then in 1999, I decided to leave and start my own nonprofit after I left the LifeQuest Project Care program. And that just ended, like I said, last summer, 26 years. So that just community was kind of like a combination of everything I always wanted to do, have my own company, design my own programs, write my own grants. And then IRP, the training level of IRP took off globally in the early 2000,
Well,
2004,
actually, we
2005.
we had a meeting to form an IIRP in 1999, so it was
Okay.
virtually simultaneous, although
Yeah,
we
so
didn't
then it
know it.
took off. And then, Ted, asked about becoming a part-time not employee, but a contract trainer, they were calling us. So I got to travel all over America training for IRP over the last 20 years. And it was an amazing experience to be in urban schools, suburban, rural, uh, and there was no authority. I had no authority really over anybody. So it was just the way that I could observe what's going on in public school in America. And I've come to the conclusion that
Yeah.
restorative practices has taken hold in many places in America. Not just the IRP, many practitioners evolved, but schools are struggling about how to engage kids in a meaningful way. And then there's so much conflict, of course. Instead of suspending and expelling and pushing kids out, they're learning how to find the root causes and still move kids into a different program if there's a serious need, but try to manage the behavior differently in schools. So yeah, I think we made a big difference and continue to. And now that I'm retired, most of my work now is in the field of I joined Braver Angels. Some of you know, I don't know if you can put that website up, but braverangels.org is dedicated to the bridging the red-blue divide in America. And I got involved with the League of Women Voters for two reasons. One, they've been around a century to engage civic engagement and work on voter registration. And in my local community, this candidates for school boards stopped meeting in public. Everybody went online after the pandemic. And I really felt that if we can't get candidates in public to do a forum or a debate, whatever you want to call it, then we're really sunk. That people only can vote for people because of party registration or popularity. So last fall, we successfully had our first in-person candidate forum here in Penn Ridge in 6 years. And I just feel that that's most of my focus will be now going forward in civic engagement. Um, I work for another company called Design Learning, Peter Block's company. Many of you know Peter Block's work. So I'm,
Tell us, no, say a little more about Peter Block and how, because let me
Yeah,
just,
because that's really another thread of social innovation.
yeah.
Is
absolutely.
Yeah, but
Yes,
Lee,
please.
I see you as somebody who's, really, you grew up in your community, you still live in your community. You've gone out and done all these things and you're still serving your community. Yeah, for years you've been telling me, I'm going to get these people together, we're going to have this conversation, or you sent me something about, some other engagement that you're doing with the community. So, tell us about Peter
All
Block,
right.
but like
Well, I
also
didn't
just the
hear of it.
value of this. Yeah.
I had never heard of him until 2008. Little did I know that he was seen in the field of business, in organization development, that field, as the guru. He wrote a book called Flawless Consulting in the 1980s or 90s. It sold well over 1 million copies. And he decided, he was, an author, philosopher, but he never lived in a community and planted roots. And his I don't
Hmm.
forget, he was married a couple of times, but his current wife lives in Cincinnati. And the story he tells is that when he married her, she said, "We're going to live in Cincinnati." So he planted roots and then decided that he would write about this stuff, but he never really fully became a community member. Now he was Jewish and he always referred to himself as a wandering Jew, literally. They just never really planted roots. And he finally did, and then he wrote this book, Community, which is a blueprint for social architecture. He's provided us with 6 essential conversations of how to gather people together. He said, stop doing the typical town hall meeting with people on an elevated stage as if they got all the answers, because they don't. And instead of Q&A, when you only have time for 5 questions, put people in small groups from the very beginning and let them talk to each other. So I started to use that methodology in my trainings, and people in public schools loved it because they never get a chance to truly talk with each other about things that really matter. They go to trainings and everybody drills into them the latest curriculum, the latest PowerPoint. One of Peter's favorite quotes is, if all you got is PowerPoint, you got neither. So anyway, I just became a great influence of mine. And yeah, I've been using some of his work. I am hosting a meeting shortly in my own community using that methodology again around cell phones and kids, because cell phones now has become a ubiquitous conversation about how they interfere with good teaching and learning and all that. So
I
anyway,
just
that's
wanted to
that's my
interject.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to interject, Lee. You also influenced me. I had that book, but I hadn't read it. You came over with a copy of it and gave it to me, and I thought, oh my God, if somebody's giving me a copy and I've been sitting on it, I might as well read
Yeah,
it. And it got so Josh and I have used that in these events we've done over the years now, where we go to small groups of 3 people to talk to each other rather than one big group and doing a go round.
exactly.
And I think it really enhances conversation. So when we
Oh,
say
well,
run a revolution by conversation,
oh,
that was a really useful thing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lee.
yeah, and for me, yeah, it's great just getting people talking to each other, but those questions, those conversations, the thing I love about them is when you answer the question, well, what's your commitment to this? Why were you here today?
Yeah.
There's nowhere to hide. It's not, you can't blame somebody else for all the problems.
Exactly.
You're answering, how am I contributing to the problem? And, I guess the question I have for you as you wandered, Lee, around and met people, what do how do you see the intersection between restorative practices as
Well,
like a way to do schools better and like this community engagement? Because to me, it's a no-brainer. It's not, I would think a lot of restorative practitioners could go the way you've gone.
yeah, well, that's a great question, and I don't know. I didn't know you were going to ask it, but the
I
school
didn't either.
anyway, in 2015, I had been attending Peter's workshops. I'd fly out to Cincinnati, and he still would hold these day-long things. He loved teaching. He loved meeting people that are using some of his material. So I said to him one day, I said, and Ted had actually gone out with your mom to see him also, and I really wanted him to come to IRP's conference in
Yeah,
keynote. And he
yeah,
said, I don't travel anymore. I'm too old, too tired. I don't need to travel. My books are doing fine. And I learned his daughter lives in Philadelphia. And I said, well, when you come to Philadelphia next, I promise you, I will pick you up at the airport. I'll be your bag man. I'll drive you to Bethlehem. And if I can coordinate this, you can become a hopefully speaker. So I called IRP
yeah.
and they agreed to put him in. And you were there, Josh. You were in that
Well,
talk.
let me tell you a funny story, Lee. I don't know if I've told you this. There's somebody on this call who, in my community here in Massachusetts, who emailed me and said, "Hey, I just saw this video with Peter Block and you stood up in the middle of it and asked a question."
That's great. Great, because he came and he was like the grandfather giving us all a blessing. He didn't know a lot about schools and RFP, but he knew about restorative justice from a guy named Mike Butler, a police chief in Longmont,
Yeah,
Colorado. Anyway, that video is on IRP's website. It's got thousands of views because
it's got, yes.
basically what he did is he said, keep doing what you're doing. This is exactly what we need to do in schools. And so the talk went really well. And his book became very popular. His publisher said it's getting legs, that the most people who are buying the book community is school teachers and faith leaders in the sectors of in your world, spirit and learning. The facets of those two. So he wrote another edition.
Mm.
And I was driving one day with my son-in-law, and he said, "It's great you're in the book." I said, "No, I'm not in the book." And he said, "Lee, I just got the book." Well, I didn't know the third edition came out. And in his chapter on restorative community, he mentioned my name, that
Oh.
he learned from me. I was flabbergasted because all I did is tell him about IRP's work. And he came to the conference and learned all the thousands of people that are
Yeah,
doing this in the world.
yeah.
So anyway, it's been
Well,
great.
I don't know. You're making me think I
These
think we
intersections.
I
Yes.
think maybe we need to do some more something around this specifically because the
Yeah.
six conversations, I don't think people know about it enough. And all right, so let's see. We've covered a lot of ground.
Well, if you want to, just before I forget, I don't know, when you send this video to your big mailing list, send
Yeah.
out some like an email, and I give you some websites that they can pursue some of this with
All right.
games and Peter's work and other things.
Just to clarify, Lee, we send to everyone who's
Oh,
registered.
good.
We don't send it to our email list.
Oh,
In
We
other
just
words,
send to the
I don't
registrants.
want
But
to burden people with more than we already do,
if
okay.
you have any links and just want to type them in the chat, that would be great. Um, and I don't know. Anybody out there listening have any questions for us? Because I think I'm getting ready to wrap up and do my closing song otherwise. It's good to see everybody. I really appreciate you guys coming. We will send out a recording. And next week we're going to have Adam Cronkright is going to be our guest. And he's the filmmaker who's done this film coming out this year. We're super excited about that shows a citizens assembly, a citizens assembly. It's non-sanctioned, just Braver Angels. They want to hear you say something more about Braver Angels, actually,
Great.
which would be really good. And that's a tie-in. So for next week, we're dealing with some of the political stuff.
And by the way, Braver Angels seems interested in, at least in my region, in promoting this film, which is about having difficult conversations.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything about your involvement with Braver Angels? Or
Well, I joined about 2 or 3 years ago. I had heard about it. It's been around since 2016. I met the founder, Bill Doherty, in Washington, D.C.
right?
The political, God, who even wants to talk about the geopolitical dynamics right now in the world? But
I
the
know.
bottom line is we're going to survive this. We will survive. Human beings will be here. In what shape or what our boundaries will be, what our government structures will be, I hope they keep improving. But we're at some pretty, intense crossroads right now. And Braver Angels at least has the mission to say you have to keep talking with each other.
Yeah.
That don't demonize others just because of their political ideology.
Yeah.
And it's pretty hard sometimes. I'll be honest with you. Right now, it's hard. But if we stop talking, then I think everything else is lost. I mean, that's what this whole work is about, to keep communicating, trying to understand.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. This was so much fun. This was so much fun, and I think we brought fun into it. I hope people, I don't know. I couldn't do work if it wasn't fun, to be honest. So
Well, and if I may just make a little clarifying pitch here, what we're trying to do with this very informal style of presenting is to move forward in the future, not necessarily always holding the kind of formal webinars we would hold, but perhaps on a almost weekly basis, introducing people like Lee and many others just as individuals, and really getting a chance to talk informally. So one of the things we're thinking of doing, and I just want to say this out loud, Josh, would people write in if they'd like this? And it's only a percentage of people that like it. And this can go out maybe in the note you send out with the with the copy of the video, is that if people would like to actually engage in a conversation, we had been, after webinars, offering a link. So as the thing was closing, some people don't want to be bothered. My wife says she doesn't want to get in these conversations. She likes coming to the webinar, but some people really like those subsequent conversations. So we're thinking of setting it up after Adam Cronkite might be a really appropriate one to try it. So if you would write in now, and also Josh, if you'll put it in the message, just let us know if that would be an option that enough people would take advantage of. We always had a few people who signed up after events, and it was fun.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll do that next week, and we'll let people know that we're going to have a half-hour
Well, that's what I'm saying.
conversations. Yeah, we'll do that. All right. Well, thanks, guys. You can stay and listen to the song. I think I picked an appropriate one today. It's a little Monty Python Flying Circus. When the world has got you down, Mr. Brown, and people are stupid, obnoxious, and daft, and you feel that you've had quite enough, just remember that you're standing on a planet that's evolving, revolving at 900 miles an hour. It's orbiting at 90 miles a second, so it's reckoned round the sun that is the source for all our power. The sun and you and me and all the stars that we can see are moving at 1,000,000 miles a day in an outer spiral arm at 40,000 miles an hour in the galaxy we call the Milky Way. Now the galaxy itself contains 100 million stars. It's 100,000 light years side from side. It bulges in the middle, 16,000 light years thick, but out by us it's just 3,000 light years wide. We're 30,000 light years from galactic central point. We go around every 200 million years. And our galaxy is only one of millions and billions in this amazing and expanding universe. Now the universe itself keeps on expanding and expanding. In every direction it can whiz, as fast as it can go. The speed of light, you know, 12 million miles a minute, and that's the fastest speed there is. So remember when you're feeling very small and insecure, how amazingly unlikely was your birth, and pray that there's intelligent life somewhere up above, 'cause there sure as hell ain't any down here on Earth. Lighten up, there are stars in the sky, lighten up. It's a good question, why? But you don't know the answer, and frankly neither do I. So meanwhile, let's just all lighten up. And remember that we're standing on a planet that's evolving, revolving at 900 miles an hour. It's orbiting at 90 miles a second, so it's reckoned around the sun that is the source for all our power. The sun and you and me and all the stars that we can see and the ones we can't too are moving at 1,000,000 miles a day. In an outer spiral arm at 40,000 miles an hour in the galaxy we call the Milky Way. In an outer spiral arm at 40,000 miles an hour in the galaxy we call the Milky Way. All right, folks. You sure made my lunch break. I appreciate it. Lee, yay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.
All right. Catch you.
Thank you. Carry on.
Catch you on the rebound. That's right. Carry on, you all. Take care. Bye-bye.